In the first two videos, I explain how cognitive dissonance is the defining factor that holds all of us back from fighting climate change, exposing our economy to be out of step with our times and values. To break its spell, we need to recognise the time has come again to advance democracy. Only this time, instead of expanding the right to vote, we shift to how that power is distributed by giving it a monetary value, thus merging capitalism and democracy closer, and we do it by changing the nature and medium of money itself. Peer back into the history of money and you'll soon notice it's always been something of a shapeshifter. Salt, for example, was used from Africa to China, shells from America to Asia, feathers were utilised in the Pacific, and even sticks were used in Europe up until the 20th century, say. Too long to explain that one. Then there's cattle, there's mackerel, and my personal favourite, though I would say that, cider, as I do come from Devon. All had been used at one time or another before we arrived at the coins and the notes and the plastic that we use today. Yet while its form has forever been changing, the values that dictate it have not. But ours have, and governments need to recognise that money must reflect this, for ultimately power is gained or lost on where we decide to spend our money, not voting, as we make these decisions every day, not once every 5 years, and these decisions are what shapes every industry, and industry is what's changing our world more than any politician in a capitalist system. Which brings us to the environment. You see, we cannot afford to ignore the news any longer. The record heat waves, the glaciers melting, and the floods. And we know we all must act. We understand too that we are not detached from nature, its lord and master as we once believed, but beholden to it. Whilst we also accept that it is ourselves, we, with our growing numbers and that ceaseless appetite of ours, that is fast gnawing away at both it and the liberties and comforts that civilization gives us. As citizens, we acknowledge and accept all of this, but as consumers, we don't. Because we still subscribe to a crude system of values, a pricing mechanism that has hardly changed since its conception, designed at a time when our numbers were small and we saw the earth as vast, flat, just waiting to be exploited through our godly right and ignorance. Today, we know different. Finite, fragile, and stunningly beautiful, isn't it? And yet, we continue to treat it like a trash can, which has put us on a fast trajectory to destroy it all. Why? Because this, money, does not recognise the environment. It does not penalise those corporations that take more over less, but the opposite. It rewards those businesses that opt for the paths that exacerbate the crisis. They that cut labour, not waste, invest in robotics and not green tech, and rather than cut emissions, it pays better to advertise under this economy. And all of this is entrenched through competition, as businesses fight one another for survival and growth, and that puts the market on a hard collision course with the brutal reality that we face as a species, our survival. It cannot go on, this flaw, this growth for growth's sake. This is what's causing our homes to flood, our forests to burn, and crops to shrivel up and die, which only serves to place further strain upon the economy anyway, as it requires ever-increasing resources to repair, making commodity prices, insurance premiums, and taxes all rise, which you and I are paying for. And this oversight is unquestionably caused by the environment not being factored into the price, which results in the economy and the environment being approached in completely separate ways that run counter to one another. And that begs the question, why? Why, when both are public concerns and both can be dealt with by any business or any consumer, as I explained in the previous video? There's no reason, therefore, why both cannot be dealt with by the market, provided we realign the signals and incentives to factor this, which returns us, yet again, to this. What is money but a medium we use to exchange, store and measure what we value? But then, couldn't you say exactly the same about tax? Both are created, oiled and maintained by the sovereignty too. The only difference is money acts as a catalyst for our individual decisions, whereas tax represents what are our collective decisions, imposed upon us, top down from the state, whether we elected them or not. It decides where to raise it, by what amount, and where those proceeds go. It's not hard to see why tax has commonly been seen as a tool of oppression. But we must not forget that it is tax that has paved the way for many of the freedoms we enjoy today. In fact, you could say the history of the state is the history of tax. You cannot have one without the other, for it provides the strongest and most practical link that tethers the state, business and people together, through redistributing our individual values towards our common needs and goals, or the opposite of misused. But here's the thing, why can't we decide who we want to tax and where those proceeds go, just like we do when using money? Why have governments monopolise this decision making when we're perfectly capable of passing judgment ourselves? If only we had a different form of money, with better signalling so it was more efficient at exchanging our values, with enhanced accountability to make it more just, and flexible too, to make it smarter, fairer, so we can cut out the bureaucracy of Parliament altogether. Well, now we can. You see, out of all the taxes yet devised, sales tax or VAT is the most active, immediate and publicly visible, as it's directly and instantly activated at the point of exchange, just like money. And that makes it uniquely and intrinsically placed for us to pass our judgment on the behaviour of brands in terms of their sustainability and how they are pushing back against the threat of climate change, so it isn't left for all of us as taxpayers, which it presently is. And therefore it's VAT that can provide the necessary signals and incentives for us to adapt our economy to the rigours and challenges of the 21st century. So what Neo-ECO-liberalism proposes is tweak it, make it variable. The lower the rate, the more sustainable the goods, and vice versa, but commensurate to their peers, for only then does it add the all-important magic dust, competition. You see, Milton Friedman was right all along when he said of there being an inescapable connection between capitalism and democracy. But he missed something. For any healthy democracy to thrive, it's essential for the public to be informed prior to making the vote, which, let's face it, rarely happens these days in politics, sadly. But in the marketplace, it's much more dire, as the exact opposite occurs. For the public not knowing who are pulling their weight, corporations exploit their position. They deceive and weave fictitious tales through their advertising, packaging and PRs. It's a cover-up, and on a grand scale, and none more so than when it comes to our environment. Our governments have become complacent, some complicit, for they've allowed corporations to take advantage of what is a democratic loophole, which distorts the market to favour corporations over us and the public good. And yet, as any economist will tell you, the marketplace, just like a healthy democracy, requires full transparency in order for it to properly function. So in other words, it's time to reset the rules of the market on our terms. We have a right to know the bad boys from the good, and by making that variable and openly displaying that rate, it breaks their stranglehold, thus rebalancing the tripartite relationship between us, corporations and government, while finally allowing all three parties to push towards that one thing that matters to us all, our future, climate change. But to see this through requires something from us too, to speedily shift towards digital payments, which I'll be explaining in the next video. Please like, subscribe and share if you want to know more. Cheers.